Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of the Mafia Members podcast for the 2025-2026 season. Very excited today. We got a very, very big surprise. Can't wait to get started. So with that, we'll get started with the intro, and then we'll get into the show.
The Mafia Members podcast.
So, like I said, we have a very big guest on the show today. One of the newest members of the Buffalo Bills team. Can't believe he even agreed to come on the show. This is great. Everybody, welcome Michael Hoecht.
What an intro that was. That was awesome. That got me ready to run through a brick wall.
Right on. Well, we're hoping that you do a lot of running through the brick wall this year for sure.
No, always do.
So I want to get started on, I guess, kind of like, obviously, you're born in Toronto, just outside Toronto, and bounced around a lot. Ohio, even spent some time here in Ottawa. How difficult is it to be noticed, kind of, by an NFL team when you're not only bouncing around like that? You're obviously playing different schools, different locations, and how kind of the challenges of making it as far as you did in that.
Yeah, I mean, I never really saw it as a negative because every time you move around, you're playing under a new coach and a new system with new teammates, and you pick things up from the people that you're around and the coaching styles and the play styles. And weirdly enough, when I'm in Ohio, it's American rules football, and then I'm in Ottawa and it's Canadian rules football, and then I'm in Toronto and it's kind of like a hybrid of both, where it's 3 downs, 12 people, but then and then there's like combinations for guys that are looking to go, play football in the States. So, as weird as it is, I think it's just really telling to my story and my career arc in the NFL, where, you bounce around from all these schools growing up, you pick up so much along the way, you make yourself a more versatile player. And then, as soon as you get in the NFL, you start becoming that, that versatility shows itself, and you end up, playing all over the defense, playing special teams, playing just about anything that's asked of you. And it's, you don't even bat an eye. You're just like, all right, here we go. This is just what football is for me.
Yeah. I guess you kind of get comfortable being uncomfortable.
No doubt. Yeah. And, I think that's served me well. And, whatever the job is in front of me, I'm going to be able to handle it.
Yeah, right on. So if you had to pick between the kind of the 3 cities, Toronto, Ottawa, and where you were at in Ohio, where would you consider home?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on, none of them are really home, but then all of them are really home. So, I've got family in Ottawa and Toronto. I've been out in LA for 5 years. I grew up most of my, adolescence in Ohio. So really close with, my high school friends there. And, I get back there a couple times a year. So it kind of really depends on what we're doing and where we're at. So for me, home is just always, if I'm around my people and wherever that is on the continent.
Right on. Awesome. So what was the process like in getting, I guess, kind of noticed by Brown? Because that's where you went to university, obviously an Ivy League school. So you must have had good grades, working hard on and off the field. And were there other schools that were interested in you, and kind of, what kind of made you choose Brown over potential other options?
Yeah, I mean, so I had decent grades. I wasn't valedictorian by any means, but and so the school I went to in Ohio, it's called Oakwood, and more of an academic school, but the football team's pretty small. And so in order to go get offers from schools, my mom and we just jumped in our car and we drove around an entire summer before my senior year. And I think we went to about 10 different schools, and, because the schools weren't sending recruiters to, come watch our football games. And so I put together, a huddle package of my highlights, and then we jumped in the car and we went to every school and was like, hey, like, I'll play tight end, I'll play running back, I'll play line. I think I had James Madison to play guard. So it was a lot of just driving around and getting myself in front of coaches and saying like, hey, like, I'm interested in playing D1 ball, and, start recruiting me. When I got to Brown, I just like the culture fit. I like the coaches. I really liked Providence as a town, and it seemed like a really good place to play football for 4 years. And honestly, where I was at that point, I didn't necessarily, know if the NFL was going to be, a possibility. So then, I figured, I'm going to go play college ball for 4 years, do what I love. If, the NFL is something that can happen, it'll happen. Guys coming out of the Ivy League all the time. And if it doesn't, you set yourself up with, a pretty decent career or a decent degree, in order to go start a career.
Yeah, right on. Kind of speaking on that, at the end, you were named all Ivy League player, but then you made the decision, I guess, to risk it with going the undrafted free agent route in the NFL versus, because Ottawa, the home team here, the Red Blacks had drafted you in the CFL. So what kind of made you, risk it, I guess, for the NFL versus, going to somewhere that had drafted you?
Yeah, I mean, the CFL draft is an interesting prospect because I had actually already signed with the Rams, and I knew I was going to take my shot at the NFL. And I think I was supposed to go like within the first couple picks for the CFL draft. And once I had signed, I started to drop down a little bit just because, they only knew that they were going to get me if it didn't work out in Los Angeles. But, for me, it was, a dream of being on an NFL roster. And, because that was in the middle of COVID, you're finishing up your classes on Zoom, and you're just like, you know what, palm trees, football, Aaron Donald, like, let's let it roll. And we'll just go try and make a dream, kind of bet it on the Hollywood sign and figure it out.
Yeah. That's awesome. I definitely would definitely can see how that decision is made. But speaking of, so you go to LA, and like you said, you already mentioned his name, Aaron Donald. What's it like, kind of your first day in the NFL? You walk into a training room, you're going to start OTAs, and there's guys like Aaron Donald standing there, and you're on the defensive side of the ball. You're going to have to go after a Jared Goff or a Matthew Stafford or whoever, and you see kind of some of these bigger names and bigger players. So what's kind of going through your head as you're coming into the league for your first time?
You obviously, you can see a ton of talent that we had on the defensive line when I first got there. And, you have these future Hall of Famers, you're surrounded by them. But I honestly, when I think about it, I think I was less concerned about like who all these like stars that are on the team, and more like, how do I not get my ass cut? Coming out of Brown, like, I'm a scrappy, undrafted, do everything, find any role that any value that I can add to the team. And so I don't think I necessarily had time to like sit and be like, wow, Aaron Donald, Jared Goff, the Michael Brockers, Ashawn Robinson, like there just kind of wasn't time to do that. It was, what do I need to do for me so that, at the end of training camp, they're not like, hey, thanks for coming out, but pack your bags, you're getting out of here.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of one of the things that you'll look back on when it's kind of, when it's all said and done, and be like, you know what, that was pretty freaking cool.
100%. And, especially going undrafted, P squad year one, really got to develop, got to play against, Andrew Whitworth and Rob Havenstein, who's still over there, and Austin Corbett. Dave Edwards, who's currently, with the Bills. So excited to reunite with him. And then our center at the time, Brian Allen, I ended up living with him for 2 years. So you end up like meeting all these people, and looking back on it, when I first walked in the door, definitely some intimidation, but then now know these guys, like these are just your guys. These are just the guys that you like hanging out with, you become friends with them. And that's one of the things I just love about football, is that the culture in the locker rooms it's so much fun. It's, you obviously love playing the games and studying the game and the X's and the O's and all the intricacies, but you can never put too much emphasis on just how fun the guys are to be around.
Yeah. And I'm sure something like that, like, especially if you're, not that Toronto's a small city, but it's not the size of LA. And, you get lots of these things being in that city, and it's nice to kind of have that kind of, friendship and camaraderie that can kind of keep you grounded a little bit while you're going through a training camp or whatever it is.
And the season's long. Like these are marathon seasons, and they just keep adding more and more games to it. So, you kind of just, as you're kind of going through the 7.5 months of NFL football, you really just get really close to these guys because you spend all day with them. And it's, from, the second you wake up and you're getting in there and you're eating and sauna and treatment and film and walkthroughs and lunch and practice and, everything that kind of goes into it. You just find a way to become really, really close with these guys because you spend so much time, and they're all just like-minded people who are out there trying to achieve greatness and try to win football games. And everybody's kind of, focused on one goal and one task. And it's just really, really fun to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is just the fan in me wants to know, like, how difficult are these OTAs and the training camps? And I'm sure you coming in as an undrafted free agent, it's probably looks a little bit different than a future Hall of Famer, Aaron Donald. Like, not that they take it easier on him, but maybe you got to put in a little bit extra work. Like, how difficult are these off-season workouts and training camps?
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely not as physical as a training camp would be. Now, my term of reference is all, the 5 years I've spent with LA. And so, I'm honestly excited to see how it runs in Buffalo. But my impression is that they're run similarly around the league. And while it's a lot less physical, it's still high demand, and, the lifts are heavy. And more than anything, OTAs, I think, are, you're putting together your plan for the season. So you're finding out who's good at what do we like as a defense, what things are we good at, what things are we not. And you sort of get your first understanding of who the 2025 Buffalo Bills are going to be. And then once you sort of know who we are, you start to develop like, all right, knowing who we are, how are we going to approach this season? What things are we going to change? How are we going to rush the quarterback? How are we going to stop the run? How are we going to scheme? What are the different pieces, that you sort of are putting together? And so OTAs are really more about coming together as a team, everybody learning who's who rushes this, and how do we want to call the scheme. And it's your first introduction into the playbook, understanding what makes sense, what doesn't, how do we learn it? Because, by the time you hit training camp, the training camp's not the time to be learning new things and doing it. That's we're practicing and getting ready for the season. So, OTAs is almost like a little bit of an experimental, and it's like a spring training where, you're testing things out and you're working through problems and you're putting, stress on either side of the ball. And we want to see, all right, how do we handle these stressful situations such that, do we need to make changes? Is this going to hold up? Is this sound football? Do people understand what's going on? So while it seems, when it's a couple, it's 4 or 5 days a week, lift and, a practice that isn't necessarily in pads, but there's still like a lot of above the neck work that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have a welcome to the NFL moment, and what was that like when you were in LA?
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty crazy because my sort of trajectory was my first year in 2020 practice squad wasn't elevated for any games. And, it was just kind of like a COVID year. So we would travel with the team, even on away games, and you would show up to the hotel, they would hand you your dinner and you would go right into your room to like avoid contact. And so it was a very different experience that first year. And then I blinked. And then the Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff trade had happened, and all of a sudden, we're, rolling. I think we started the season like 7-1 that year. And, I think we go through and, everybody who's kind of part of that team, and Taylor Rapp and Dave Edwards, also with the Bills, they can attest to this, is we go through the month of November and we don't win a single game. I think we lose to Tennessee, then we lose to San Francisco, go on a bye week, and then we lose to Green Bay. And it was a real like coming together moment for the team, where, you start the season hot, Super Bowl aspirations, and then it's like, all right, what happened here? And then all of a sudden you sign Odell, and then you go sign Vaughn. And then we just start rolling people again. And, I think the catalyst to all that was we go play Arizona on a Monday night football game, and like 10 guys get tested positive for COVID. And so a bunch of guys are out. And I think Matthew at the time just started dicing people. And, I think that was the moment, is like, all right, we're back. Everybody calm down. Like, let's go win. And we did. So, I think as an NFL, a welcome to the NFL moment, it was like such a whirlwind first year and a half that then you go through that tumultuous time. And then, all it kind of takes is, one game, one spark, one small little thing that can completely turn a season around. And when you're coming from college, you lose a game, a lot of times you're probably out of it, maybe less so now with the expanded bracket, but it was a real, hey, we lost a couple games. We still got a lot of football ahead of us. So it kind of taught me that, that the NFL season's long, there's a lot of work to do. And, as soon as all you got to do is punch a ticket to the dance and then win 4 games. So ideally, you punch the one and you're only winning 3, but regardless, you're never out of it. All you got to get into the dance with, hopefully home field advantage. And then you just got to go win.
Yeah, well, coming to Buffalo, you'll have home field advantage.
That's the
plan. Speaking of coming to Buffalo, did you were you a fan of the team growing up? Like, obviously, it's close to Toronto, kind of close to where you were growing up. So, were you a fan, and did you kind of go down to the stadium for games, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a fan. Never made it down to the stadium, and we had gone down to Niagara a couple times, and but I think by the time I was like ready to start like watching and caring about football, it was sort of in the Ohio State, Cincinnati Bengals sort of world, but always like a love and appreciation for Bills Mafia, because it's obviously every time we'd go home for Christmas or do anything, it's right across the lake there, and you're excited to see one of the best fan bases, if not the best fan base in the NFL. And it's just really, really fun to be, around, and there's always just great energy and great buzz around the program. So definitely a lot of admiration for it. And so excited. I still feel like I'm, dreaming being part of it.
Well, sometimes for us fans, it feels like a dream that you're coming here too. So what made you choose Buffalo? Like, why, like, did that factor into your decision, or what kind of led you to agree to come to Buffalo?
100%. I mean, obviously they're contenders every single year. It's a really, really exciting time to be a Buffalo Bill. I think it's obviously a homecoming. So it's, a lot closer to friends and family, a lot closer to all of my college friends. And, you play at MetLife, and I have a lot of friends who live in New York. You play at Gillette. I got a lot of friends who live in Boston. Obviously all the home games, my whole extended family is going to be coming to all of those. And then, on top of that, I throughout the whole league, like I feel like you hear that just Buffalo's got amazing culture. It's a well-run professional organization that, does all the little things right. They care about the right things. And, I think it's just a place that I've, wanted to, see for a while. And it almost happened last year. I was a restricted free agent, and then the Rams tendered me.
Okay.
And then, so it almost happened last year, but then, once it happened this year and Buffalo was involved, it's like, all right, like this is a no-brainer. You're playing with, Josh Allen, the league's MVP. How do you say no to this? You just can't.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, like, was it always kind of a plan for you to play for Buffalo? Like at one point or another, you wanted to come to the city to play?
I mean, I would have loved to at any point. Unfortunately, the business of sports, doesn't always work out like that. And, a lot of times as a player, you don't have choice. And that's why free agency is such like a fun option. And I'm just so fortunate and lucky that Buffalo was one of the teams that was interested in me, and that one of the teams I think I fit in schematically and fit in well, and will fit in with the culture. So, who knows how things kind of shake out. I've just been really, really fortunate that, first with LA, and got my legs under me, but to be able to have a homecoming like this is just really, really cool. It's a really, really special NFL moment for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we've seen, speaking of you having, like, you felt like this was a good fit. We've seen you kind of play all over the field, D line, you played linebacker. I think we even saw a clip of you locking up DK Metcalf at in one game there. So, like, what is your fit? Where do you see yourself fit in this team? Like, what position do you kind of, I guess, prefer to play, or, kind of how do you see yourself fitting into this team? We're obviously a defense that does lots of substitutions and rotations through the defensive line. So how do you think you fit into that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think that's what we figure out during OTAs and training. I know the things that I'm really, really good at, and I'm really, really good against the run. Gap scheme, pullers, crack toss, duos. A lot of these plays that 4-down structures get. And I understand football well, and that's a lot of playing good defense, is understanding what's going on, and then I think on third down, the biggest part for me is just versatility. So, being able to rush, being able to cover, being able to rush inside, being able to rush outside, being off the ball, being on the ball. So, I think I add a level of creativity and a level of versatility to like a rush package and a rush front that, we're going to be able to do some creative things, and we're going to be able to do disguise some pressures, disguise some coverages, disguise some sims, and just be able to give our defense the biggest advantage that we possibly can. And then, last year I blocked 3 kicks. I've blocked a punt. I've returned a kick. I've pretty much done it all. So any value that I can add, anything that I can do to help us win a Super Bowl, that's my job for the next 3 years here.
Awesome. Well, definitely agree on the bringing the Super Bowl for sure. How much does you see kind of McDermott being he's creative in his play concepts and his play design? Like, does that make you excited? Is that like another level of excitement coming here and kind of seeing how that's all going to play out and kind of, learning this new system?
100%. And, I think, the Bills for the last, handful of years here have been contenders for a reason. And, if you just have, one part of your team that's really, really good, you might win 12 games, but you're not really going to be a serious contender. And Buffalo's a serious contender, and they have been consistently for the last handful of years. And, to me, that just means you're a well-rounded, well-balanced, you've got really, really good, skill positions and D linemen and rush groups. And obviously the quarterback's the most important piece of that, but then, coaching and play style and culture and, fan base and all of the things that go into, a winning a championship and winning DNA within a program. I think this place has got it. And, I think the moves we're making in free agency are really, really important. And I think this defense is going to be really, really fun to play. I think we got awesome people around. We're obviously loading up, the defensive line and rush group. And, we're going to have skills positions for Josh to throw to. And Josh is obviously, can run, can throw, can pass, can pretty much do everything that you would want from a quarterback. So, I think it's going to be really fun. I think we're going to be versatile. We're going to be scrappy. I think we're going to be, we're going to have the grit and the culture to be able to go the distance.
Yeah, right on. If you, do you have a highlight, a play or a game or something like that you would say, this is who I am. Like, this is what I'm bringing to the Buffalo Bills. Do you have something like that you would be able to think of, or, if nobody knew who you were, this describes who you are and your kind of your play style?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you watched either of the times we played Philly last year between I think it was week 12 or week 13, and then we played them again in the divisional round, obviously. But, I think that's a good, picture of kind of who I am, where teams aren't running the ball on my side. I take that very personally. And then, just being able to be, such an important piece to the, to the rush group, and being able to get people lined up and get people set up, and just having, a very well-rounded, well-balanced game. I think either of the times we played Minnesota are good. When we played New England, which is good, which is great because we'll be playing them twice a year. Yeah, I think if you just kind of watch like the totality of the season and kind of the runs that go my way, I think you'll get, a pretty clear picture of some of the collisions I'm going to be making.
Okay, right on. That gets me fired up. Has it, you've mentioned Edwards and Rapp. Obviously, you've played with them in LA. Did you know anybody else on the team, maybe from college or something like that, or has anybody else reached out to you to kind of welcome you to the team?
I met Reed Ferguson down at the NFLPA Summit in Maui. But other than that, not really. Unfortunately, Brown does have a ton of guys in the NFL. And, there's a handful of Ivy League guys, but, you just don't see them that often. So no, I mean, those are the guys like won a Super Bowl with them. They were, we obviously got to enjoy that moment together. And, that's something that 21 Rams team, all the guys that are part of that, I think we're all still very close. So excited to get back to the locker room with those guys. And, as long as you know a couple guys, it's pretty easy to make that transition.
Yeah, I feel like lots of guys are they're all understanding of, coming to a new team, or they've been on a new team themselves. So they're kind of open to, they're not going
to, every single year, there's so much roster turnover, even coaching turnover and player turnover. So you just kind of get each year is going to write its own story. Each year, each locker room is going to have its own fit and its own vibe and its own feel. And, I'm just really excited to get into, the locker room this year and, start to figure out and start to, create that good culture and that good vibe that the team has.
Yeah, man, we're definitely excited to have you. But I wanted to get into some rapid fire questions here for you. Okay, so but before we close out the show, a couple rapid fire ones. So, have you been to Buffalo? Have you tried the wings? And where's your best place to get wings and what flavor?
So I've been to Buffalo. Haven't had wings in Buffalo yet, but I've heard Wing Nuts is great, and I'm very, very excited to go try it.
Okay, ranch or blue cheese?
Blue cheese. That is easy. That's a layup.
Oh boy. Strip sack or interception?
Whichever one leads the points on our side. If we recover the fumble and house it, great. If we pick six, even, that's also great. But if I have to choose, whichever one's leading the points.
Okay, right on. I like that. Living in LA or living in Toronto?
Tough to pick. LA is obviously nice. Weather's great. But Toronto's, I feel like in LA, you start to miss like a white Christmas. And some of the snow and the cold and getting some seasons there, but then when you're in Toronto and it's April and it snows, it's like, all right, maybe some palm trees might be nice.
It's funny, I was just having that conversation today because it's kind of feeling like spring right now, and you can't replace that feeling of the winter finally being over and getting spring, so you need those 6 months of snow and nastiness.
100%.
If not football, what would your career be?
Not an option. I'd be coaching football, talking about football. I'd be running another podcast about football. I'd be thinking about football. It's the only answer there is football.
Okay, right on. Favorite cheat meal?
I actually have been trying to think about this one a lot. Like I love like a big breakfast burrito that's just got like these greasy tater tots in it. I like when you ask me that, that's like the first thing that come to mind. So I'm gonna stick with that for now.
Okay, right on. Do you know the Bills chant song?
It's Shout, right? The Bills
Shout, yeah.
I got that. Yep.
Okay, so you'll be singing along on the sidelines?
Yeah, they'll be playing that song a lot.
Okay, right on. And then lastly, if you have a final message for all the Bills fans that are going to be tuning in.
I'm just, excited to get to work, excited that, I think we've, especially through free agency and I'm sure coming up here in the draft, we're going to be making some exciting moves. We're going to put together a good team and, I'm here to have fun and I'm here to have, bring a good culture and a good vibe, to this team. And, I think every Sunday that Bills Mafia is going to be watching and playing, we're going to be trying to have a party on the field and, do everything we can to, bring a Lombardi to Western New York. And that's the ultimate goal of things. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and I'm very, very excited.
Awesome, man. I cannot wait to see you playing for the Bills this season. It was well known that we needed help on the defensive line, and seeing you and some like you said, some of the other free agency moves that we've done. It's very exciting time to be a Buffalo Bills fan. So thank you very much. You're the first player I've ever had on the show to interview. So I thank you so much. This has been so cool for me. And I just appreciate you coming by.
Absolutely. Happy to jump on whenever.
Okay, man. Thank you very much.
Yep. Take care. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye.